Good afternoon, and welcome to a special WDCB Blues Fest Week broadcast from the PianoForte studios in Chicago. I'm Leslie Keros, and in just a moment, I'll be joined by one of the Chicago blues scene's all-around men, pianist, singer, and guitarist, Brother John Kattke. This broadcast is made possible through the cooperation of the PianoForte Foundation, a nonprofit whose mission is to preserve and promote piano culture in Chicago and beyond. More info online at pianofortefoundation.org. And a special note that not only are we coming to you on 90.9 FM and WDCB.org, this broadcast is also being televised on cable in Chicago through our partners at CAN TV. Our thanks to CAN TV for carrying this event live on cable channel 27 and online at cantv.org. So, let's get started. Live from PianoForte in Chicago, here's Brother John Kattke on WDCB.
Can I tell them what I'm going to play here?
Go right ahead.
I'd like to start out with a song that I learned from my good buddy John Brumbach. We did a bunch of gigs together at Andy's in Chicago, and he introduced me to this song that was written and recorded by David Fathead Newman called Hard Times.
The music of Brother John Kattke on DCB Jazz, who is performing live here at PianoForte in Chicago, and who will also be performing this weekend at the Chicago Blues Festival. Welcome to the program, John.
Thanks.
And obviously you mentioned David Fathead Newman, we just heard from, but lots of Ray Charles in there as well.
Sure. Yeah, Ray, of course, played piano on that recording.
And I like the way that you brought them both together on that song. Isn't that the job of the piano sometimes, when you're playing solo especially? To reflect various instruments all at the same time?
Yeah, I remember hearing a story about Fats Waller and him saying that, you know, his intent with the piano was to replicate a whole Dixieland band.
All right.
So, you know, he's got the stride piano comes from jumping back and forth between the bass and the chord and trying to play a melody with, you know, all five fingers on your right hand. Mm-hmm. So
I notice you're definitely a two-handed piano player.
Yes. Yep.
Very important to do that. But you don't all just play piano. There are some other instruments you play as well.
Well, I play organ and also guitar, and I sing. And
I hope we can hear some more of that today.
Sure, I'll do a little bit of vocalizing. But yeah, I've toyed around with saxophones. My first instrument was actually ukulele when I was a kid. Yeah.
How old were you? Do you remember when you took
About
that up?
maybe 4 or 5. I started piano lessons at the age of 6.
Okay.
And then violin in school when I was 9.
And so was the ukulele just hanging around the house?
Yeah, it was kind of more of a toy. I had some sort of toy piano when I was a kid. I believe it was a small, maybe octave and a half, but I believe,
Electric kind of instrument?
I don't think it was electric. This would have been, about 1970, and I think it had strings and hammers in it.
Really?
But I can't say for sure.
Wow. So you fooled around with that for a while, and then you started taking lessons?
Yeah, my brother started taking lessons first, and my mom made me wait about another year before she'd let me start. So.
Okay, so a little bit of competition there when you started?
I don't know if I would say competition, but yeah, I saw him doing it, and I wanted to do it too.
What kind of music did you first start playing?
Well, I can tell you some stories about my piano teacher who I was very fond of. But she was mostly a classical approach. That was the discipline that she taught. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'll tell you a story. We lived outside of Boston.
Okay.
And I took lessons for about 5 years there, and then my family moved to Illinois. So some 15 years later, 16 years later, I had not seen her or talked to her. I mean, I was only 10 years old when we moved away from Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And I was playing a Buddy Guy show at Manchester, New Hampshire, I think. Ran into a bunch of college kids who said, "Oh yeah, we're from Lowell, Massachusetts." I was like, that's got to be right down the street from where I used to live in North Andover. And we were playing at the Channel in Boston the next day.
Oh, yes, yes.
And I said, we're going.
I saw B.B. King at the Channel in Boston, actually.
Oh,
so.
great.
Uh-huh.
So I said, I should try to visit my old piano teacher in North Andover. And they said, well, you can catch a ride back with us and crash on the couch at our dorm. And so I did. And I woke up the next morning and got on a payphone and looked up her number in the phone book. And I said, hey, I'd like to come and visit. I know I haven't seen you in 15 years. And she says, well, she was up there in years when we moved away.
Ah, okay.
And so she had to be maybe 70-something at this point. And she said, well, you better hurry. I've got a student at 3 o'clock. She was still teaching. So I went by, played some songs for her, and, played the...
Did you play classical for her?
No, my classical chops really... if somebody gives me a piece of written music, I can study it and learn it, but I really have not maintained a classical repertoire, unfortunately, so...
Well, it's interesting you mentioned a piece of written music, and I think... did you find it a challenge to go from the written sheet music of classical to other types of music where you won't necessarily have all the notes written out?
Well, I didn't find it a challenge. Mm-hmm. I know that it can be for some people who have grown up with the discipline of reading music, but you have to keep your ears open. My teacher did show me some kind of concepts of theory, chords and scales, and that kind of opened my mind to sort of thinking about music more than each individual note written on a staff. Mm-hmm. But I think playing guitar in the early years that I played guitar kind of prodded me along to play by ear.
Okay.
You learned a few chords and strum, and you listen to things, and back in those days, sheet music was terrible. If you wanted to learn popular music or anything other than classical, you couldn't find good written music for it, so you really were forced to use your ear, which is good.
Would you like to play another tune for us?
Sure.
All right.
Let's see.
Remind folks that we're listening to John Kattke performing live on DCB Jazz in the PianoForte Foundation Studios in Chicago.
I'm going to do your request, Leslie. This is a song that I recorded last year with Dave Spector on Delmark Records. It's on his Message in Blue record, and it's all about this great city that we live in.
All right.
Wherever I go and wherever I roam, there's always something that brings me home. In a car, on a lonesome train, something pulls me back again. It might be love, there's no denial. It's something I call Chicago style. From Junior Wells to Howlin' Wolf, from Buddy Guy to Lonnie Brooks, from Magic Sam to Otis Clay. They love to sing and they love to play. From the South Side to the Magnificent Mile, blues and soul, Chicago style. You might wonder what I mean. Chicago style is my thing. It's the blues and it's the sound. It's the only game in town. Muddy Water and Otis Rush, Sonny Landslim, they have the touch. Willie Dixon and Mighty Joe, there's not a song that they didn't know. From the South Side to the Magnificent Mile, blues and soul, Chicago style. Chicago style, the latest news. Chicago style, stuff you gotta use. Chicago style, you can't lose with Chicago style. You might want to stay a while and hear the blues. Chicago style.
Brother John Kattke on DCB Jazz. You're listening to DCB Jazz. I'm Leslie Keros, and we're broadcasting live this afternoon from the PianoForte Foundation Studios in Chicago. John Kattke will be performing this weekend at the Chicago Blues Festival, which runs Friday through Sunday at Grant Park. Thank you, John. And I just wanted to mention, that's from Dave Spector's album that you worked with on him. You've been working with him quite a few years now, haven't you?
Yes. I did a few scattered gigs with him years back, but we really started working a lot more regularly together maybe five or so years ago. I've done his last two records. Mm-hmm.
And some of the people you mentioned in the lyric there, Buddy Guy and Junior Wells, you've played with them, obviously, and you also led Otis Rush's band for a few years, didn't you?
I played second guitar in Otis's band from about 95 to 98, yeah.
So these are some giants in the business. I'd love to hear some stories you might have about playing with them, what you learned from them. Good and otherwise? Cautionary tales?
All good. Yeah. I remember a funny story when we were recording with Junior. I think it was at Paragon Studios. It was right about the time there was a club called Brother Jimmy's in Chicago.
Okay.
They were hiring all the same bands that were playing at the Kingston Mines. Mm-hmm. But they were paying them a flat rate, or I don't know how they were working the money, but they weren't charging a cover charge.
Okay. Was it near the mines, or just?
It wasn't too far from the mines. It was
Okay.
over, I think it was over on Sheffield, maybe just south of where the Vic Theater is.
Okay, so on the north side.
Yeah, not far from the mines at all. But so running the same acts and letting the public come in without paying a cover charge. And there was a big article in the Reader, I think it was front page in the Reader, about how the people that ran the Kingston Mines and Blues on Halstead were all up in arms about this, and they told all the bands that were working for them that if they went over to Brother Jimmy's and played, that they would never work at the mines again. And Marty, I believe it was Marty Salzman, Junior's manager at the time, was reading this article to Junior while we were sitting in the studio.
What did Junior say to that?
Junior said, "Marty, go over there to Brother Jimmy's and get me a gig."
There you go. Awesome. And did he play over there?
I don't remember if he played there.
Wow.
I didn't play all of his shows. I did that record and I did a few isolated shows that
What's the name of the record again?
Undisputed Godfather of the Blues.
All right, by Junior Wells.
Yeah.
Do you remember roughly when that was?
I just looked it up when we were talking earlier. It was 1993.
Okay.
Which was during the time that I was working with George Bays a lot, who was the
guitarist.
guitar player in Junior's band, and who was the guy that introduced me to Buddy Guy, and really, George did a lot for me. I'm really grateful to have had the pleasure of working with George.
Is he related to John Primer? I think I read somewhere.
You know, I don't know. I know that John would guest on some of the gigs that I did with George, and they were good friends. But I don't know if there's if he's related. I think I may see John later today down at Buddy Guy's Legends, and so I'll have to ask him that.
Now, you've got a busy day ahead of you.
Yeah.
And then you'll be back on WDCB tonight.
With Gerald McClendon at 10 o'clock. Yep, on the Ham Bones Blues Party.
That's right. Should be a lot of fun.
Back of the Cadillac.
Well, you know, I hate to do this to you, but I think I'm going to kick you back up to the piano. I want to
Okay.
hear some more.
All right.
Brother John Kattke on WDCB 90.9 FM.
I'm sending this next song out to my beautiful wife, Buffy. We're both big Freddie King fans, and so I'd like to do one of Freddie's songs that's probably not as well known, and I think this was recorded on Shelter Records. I'm not sure if Leon Russell might have been one of the co-writers of this, but great lyrics. Their lyrics are spot on. I travel the highway, I've made many scenes, I've been lost in the darkness, I've been out on the street, I felt so unhappy, sometimes I wanted to die, but if I have your sweet, sweet loving, I know I'll get by. This old world keeps on churning like wheels on a train. I hold on to each moment that it won't come again. I'm not educated, but one thing I know, that I'd rather be blind than to see you go. I thank God for a strong woman who knows how to be weak and to make me feel so good every time that she speaks. All the revelation in her smile feels so much like heaven when I'm with her for just a little while. So don't leave me, darling. No, whatever you do, when I'm standing beside you, I know we'll get through. There's only one thing, baby, that I want you to know. I'd rather be blind than to see you go. That I'd rather
Brother John Kattke on DCB Jazz. You're listening to DCB Jazz. I'm Leslie Keros, and we're broadcasting live from PianoForte Studios in downtown Chicago. Come on over, John. You just mentioned Freddie King right there, and you know, one of my favorite pianists played with Freddie King way back when.
Dave Maxwell?
Yes,
Yeah.
he was just phenomenal. Now, you must have seen him in Boston. Did you ever see him in Boston?
I don't know that I ever saw him in Boston. I was 10 years old when
That's
I moved
right.
away from
You were
Boston.
too young.
But Dave and I played together.
Dave
with,
Spector?
No, Dave Maxwell.
Okay.
Played together on a Japanese tour with Otis Rush.
Oh,
I think
really?
I think
Wow.
that's when I met Dave. I saw him do some solo piano stuff too, way back, and I can't remember where that was. I actually just ran into him less than a year ago in Hell, Norway, where they have the Hell Blues. The
You
Blues
said
in
that
Hell
so
Fest.
casually. I thought, oh, of
Yeah.
course, that's where you met him.
No, that's not where I met him, but that was the last time I saw him, was over in Norway last fall. He was playing on the same festival, the Blues in Hell Festival.
Oh my gosh. Well, speaking of blues festivals, you'll be playing this weekend at the Chicago Blues Festival, Friday through Sunday. So tell us who you'll be performing with.
Well, I'm playing later today at Legends with Dave Spector. He'll have Jimmy Johnson and Otis Clay and Shamika Copeland all on the gig.
Wow. What time does that start?
That, I think, is 6 to 7:30. Yeah, I mistakenly put 4 o'clock on my website. Oops.
Okay.
But it's, no, I don't think we go live until 6. And then at 10 o'clock tonight, I'll be with Gerald on WDCB.
Gerald McClendon, the singer.
Gerald McClendon, yep, out at, from COD. Let's see, tomorrow, I believe it's noon or close to it, I'll be at the Windy City Blues Society tent on Columbus with a singer named Jade Mays. My old buddy that I mentioned earlier, John Brumbach, will be playing saxophone with us.
Excellent.
And let's see, and then I'm off for the rest of the day. I'll just be hanging out at the festival with my wife.
All right. Are you playing with Gerald McClendon again?
Then we're doing the radio thing with Gerald tonight, but Saturday, and once again, I don't recall the time, but it's early, it might be 12:30 or 1 p.m. We are at the same tent for the Windy City Blues Society on Columbus.
All right. Excellent.
And then the other, I'm doing an early gig on Sunday, but it's way out in Rockford. Gerald's on that gig too. I believe it's at the Public Library in Rockford. Late on Sunday, I'll be doing an after party at Reggie's on South State. All-star band put together
that's right.
by Dave Katzman.
Remind me who's on that gig.
I believe it's Marty Binder on drums. Marty, my musical brother for many years. I think Bob Stroger is on bass. If I'm not mistaken, Jimmy Johnson.
Jimmy Johnson, I think, is on that gig too. Yeah.
Maybe Billy Flynn does a lot of those. And
Should be a lot of fun.
yeah, I'm sure there will be lots of special guests showing up to sit in and play with us. It'll be a jam session. Dave calls it a pro jam. Yeah.
Well, speaking of jam sessions, you host the Monday night jam session. Co-host, I said, you and Jimmy Burns take turns there at Buddy Guy's.
Yes, we alternate. So I'll MC one week and then Jimmy will MC the next week. I've been doing that for about 25 years now, and I'm hoping that if I do a good job that it might turn into a steady gig.
Well, tell me about what do you like about the jam session? I mean, is it getting to meet artists who are just developing their chops? Is it just the variety of people you play with, or what draws you to it and keeps you interested?
Well, it's both of those things that you mentioned. I've seen lots of guys that come through and they're maybe kind of new on the scene, and they come down to the jam session, and then the next thing you know, they're recording artists in town, or they're working with touring bands that they networked and hooked up with. And that's why Buddy wants the jam session there. Like,
To give people a place to learn how to play? And exposure, or?
I suppose it can be a learning experience, but I think it's for the exposure. I mean, you know, if you're unknown, up and coming artist, you know, where do you go to get some exposure? You know, Buddy says, I mean, these people are gonna come up out of the clubs, they're gonna start playing in the clubs, that's where you're gonna see them first. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with his story of coming to Chicago, and Otis Rush, you know, let him come up and play his guitar, and so that's how he got some exposure. And I mean, if people don't have a chance to get a foothold anywhere, then, you know, how are they supposed to get started? So that's why he wants the jam session to be an opportunity for new talent to showcase themselves. And I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen a lot of times. I mean, you know, Eric Guitar Davis was a regular at the jam session before he got his own band together and started getting work at clubs in town. So, you know, yeah, it's just, I mean, some of the guys that are successful and they're gigging a lot, they don't come into the jam session anymore. But, you know, that helped them get their start. So, you know, we're glad to see them come through and go on to maybe, you know, more successful things. I mean, jam session is kind of maybe a stepping stone for some people.
Well, speaking of a foothold, how did you get your foothold here in Chicago?
I went to a jam session.
Did you really?
Yeah, and I was only 19 at the time, and so Legends wasn't around back in those days. The Kingston Mines was, but I got carded at the Kingston Mines and turned away. I'm not going to say where it was that I was able to get in.
Okay.
But I ran into Jimmy Mays and Sammy Fender there, and they hired me to do my first steady gig in Chicago, which was down at 58th and Prairie at a place called Love's Place.
And this was playing piano?
Yes. Some people knew it as the old Oklahoma Lounge. And so I worked there with them every Sunday. And then I was rehearsing with another band. After rehearsal one night, we stopped into the Tip-On Inn on Southwestern. And Killer Ray Allison was playing drums. Orlando Wright was playing bass. George Bays was playing guitar. And I ended up sitting in with them. And George asked me who I was working with, and I said, you know, Jimmy Mays. And he kind of chuckled because he knew Jimmy from way back. And we started working at a club on Rush Street. I think it was called Close Encounters. George had the gig there Tuesday through Saturday. And then I picked up the gig there playing with Bill Warren and his band on Sundays and Mondays, so I was there 7 nights a week for a while.
Wow, that's a lot of practice.
But then Legends opened, and so we started playing down there, and so it was basically George Bays that introduced me to Buddy and his club.
Well, we're talking here a lot about blues, obviously. Blues is in the forefront this weekend here in Chicago, but there are other types of music that I know you like to play, or that are blues related, but perhaps go in a different direction. And let's talk about that for a bit. I know you've played some John Coltrane, and we were talking earlier about New Orleans piano. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your influences and maybe demonstrate.
Okay. Let's see. Well, first off, I don't really draw the lines between this music because there's big gray areas, and it's kind of more of a spectrum. You know, there's blues. I mean, there's some things that are very stereotypically blues or jazz, and you listen to them and see, you know, that, yeah, that's jazz, that's not blues, or that's blues, that's not jazz. But there's a ton of great music that kind of blurs the lines in between the styles, and I enjoy all of that stuff. So I try not to get pigeonholed too much as, you know, oh, you're a blues player. Well, yeah.
And?
That doesn't mean I can't or don't like to play jazz. And yeah, the stuff in between is some of my favorite. So, would you like to hear some of that?
I would.
All right.
is a beautiful piano, isn't it? Brother John Kattke here on WDCB. You're listening to DCB Jazz. I'm Leslie Keros, and we are broadcasting live from PianoForte Foundation Studios in Chicago. Well, that is a beautiful piano. Fazioli? Is that how you pronounce the name? All right.
Yeah.
Have you ever played a Fazioli before?
I have not. This is my first time, and it's very very expressive. It's easy to play. The action is not as heavy as some grand pianos, but yeah, very very dynamic. You know, in the practicality, the working world of playing live music, sometimes I have to play electric pianos, and they're not the same.
Well, you don't have the expressiveness that you have, obviously, with an acoustic piano.
For sure. The dynamics here are very nice.
But I imagine you've played some other pianos that weren't quite so in such fine shape. As a blues pianist especially.
Yeah. No, I've been lucky. I have a steady gig. Fall, winter, spring, I've been playing Fridays out at Hugo's Frog Bar in Naperville, and they've got a nice little. It's a console. It's not a grand, but Jim Eckwall tunes it and keeps it in. He's a good piano tuner, and it feels good. I've played that piano so much now that I'm probably more at home on it than any other one. Even though it's not the greatest piano, I'm just used to it. But no, it's nicer than what I have at home.
Well, then you know, when you play guitar, for example, you can bring the guitar with you, so there aren't any surprises there.
Yes.
So you have more than one guitar, I imagine?
I have a few. My favorite is an ES-347.
Okay, I won't pretend to know what that means.
It's just a Gibson semi-hollow body guitar.
And so do you have your own band, and you play guitar and sing in that band, is that right?
Well, I've got a bunch of guys in the band who double on different instruments. Marty Binder most often plays drums with us. But my friend Doug Corcoran plays both piano and trumpet. So,
really?
Yeah, so...
That's an interesting combination.
And my friend Marquel Jordan sings and plays saxophone. Another guy that works with us a lot is Chris Neal, and he sings and plays saxophone and plays keyboards. So we'll all just kind of play musical chairs while we're on the bandstand. So sometimes I play guitar, sometimes I play piano with the band.
What draws you to the guitar as opposed to piano?
Interesting. Well, bending strings is a big part of the expression.
Well, you know, I'd like to respond to that. I remember Monty Alexander, the pianist, observing once at the piano that he likes to play between the notes, so he plays the cracks. And he proceeded to do just that. So that was his way of, you know, of expanding the possibilities.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. It's different than the piano. You've got a different approach, maybe because, you know, you've got 6 voices in the 6 strings, and you can manipulate them how you want. Oddly enough, I think that me playing both instruments has influenced both. Like, you know, people...
Oh, how so?
Some people will listen to me play piano and they say, you play piano like a guitar player. And they'll listen to me play guitar.
What does that mean, do you think?
They'll listen to me play guitar and they'll say, you play guitar like a piano player. Does that mean that I sound like I'm wearing boxing gloves when I play both instruments? I don't know. Well, some of the chord voicings I play on piano, I know are voiced in fourths, like the strings are tuned in fourths on a guitar. Just some of the approach to melodic stuff that sits naturally on a guitar, I tend to find myself playing once in a while on the piano. So I don't know. You get used to playing certain things and think about them, and you don't consciously think about them, but you know, your mind and your muscle memory kind of works that way.
Well, one thing that we haven't talked much about yet is the songwriting that you like to do, and how you write with taking other people's melodies and write as well. And Can you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, that's funny. When we did the Chicago-style song, actually Dave and his friend Bill Brickta wrote the lyrics, and he came into the studio and said, I want to, set these lyrics to a shuffle. So it was actually me who came up with the melody, and I don't know, I didn't really think about it, it just kind of came to me. I was like, okay. And I think it was also my idea to shorten one of the verses and make it into a bridge, and so it gave the song a little more structure. But I don't consider myself a prolific writer. I've had the good fortune to work with some guys that are, I was lucky enough to work with Earl King. I love his writing.
Wow.
And I like Dave's original compositions. The last record that we did before Message in Blue was all instrumental. There was no vocal on it, no lyrics. But
Do you think he'll ever actually approach the microphone and sing?
he was talking about wanting to do it recently.
Really?
But I don't think I've ever actually heard him attempt it. But I think he's thinking about it.
All right then.
It's in the works.
Well, I think we've got time for one more selection. What would you like to play for us?
I'd like to do a song that I wrote.
Oh, please do.
And this is a theme that I think a lot of people can relate to. If you listen to the lyrics from start to finish, they'll make a lot more sense. But it's a story of love and loss. And I think if you listen to the lyrics all the way down, that it'll make sense to you.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Brother John Kattke on DCB Jazz, broadcasting live from PianoForte in Chicago.
In the still of the night is when she ran away, and I wonder if I might see her come the break of day. But I let her go. Now all I've got is a lonely bone. I really miss her. She didn't even say goodbye. I don't even think she tried. All I can do is cry. I'll let her go. Tonight I'll be howling at the moon. I really miss her. Maybe she didn't like being tied down, kicking around that same old piece of ground. But it ain't the same not having her around. If she comes back, I'll really kiss her. Don't miss your water till your well runs dry. But I remember how she used to lick me and stare with the big brown eyes. And even though her breath was bad, right now I'm really feeling sad. She was the best friend I ever had. Maybe it's because I patch of yellow snow. I really miss that dog.
I love the ending of that one, John. Brother John Kattke here on DCB Jazz and also performing live at PianoForte Studios in Chicago. You've got a great sense of humor, John.
That's a true story, though.
All right. And you will be performing this weekend at the Chicago Blues Festival, happening Friday through Sunday. Also, later on this afternoon, early evening at Buddy Guy's Legends.
Yes, and if I can plug my website, all
Please
of those
do.
shows are listed there at brotherjohn.com.
All right, very good. You've been enjoying the voice and piano of Brother John Kattke in a live performance from the PianoForte Studios in Chicago. You can find out more about his appearances this weekend at the Chicago Blues Festival, as well as his full local performance schedule, as he mentioned, at www.brotherjohn.com. And be sure to say hello to the WDCB crew at the festival this weekend. You'll find our booth on Jackson Street in Grant Park, and our on-air hosts will also be emceeing the performances at the Crossroads stage. This broadcast is made possible through the cooperation of the PianoForte Foundation, a nonprofit whose mission is to preserve and promote piano culture. You can find out information on all of PianoForte's events online at pianofortefoundation.org. Our thanks to Thomas Zoles, Victor Lejeune, and the entire crew here at the PianoForte Studios for their help with today's broadcast. Thanks also to the folks back at WDCB for their production help, including Barry Winograd, Clarice Kavoris, Bill Tennant, and Ken Scott. And thanks again to Brother John Kattke for sharing his music with us. I'm Leslie Keros. Thank you for listening, and happy Blues Fest.